We tried designing the same dinosaur. One of us is 3D,
and one of us isn't.
I'll be covering the concept art, composition, and the process that a 2D artist has to do before he takes over.
And when I do, I'm talking over sculpting, retopology, texturing, rigging, and rendering.
But in the end, we want to know who brought this dinosaur to life better. When we talked about what dinosaur we could do, you can say he's done a ton of dinosaurs. But when he suggested a ceratopsian, we settled on the Pachyrhinosaurus canadensis. And as I started to get poses down, they were not working at all. I knew I wanted something dynamic at least, or powerful. So I went to basics doing study poses of what would be the closest thing, and that was Yellowstone's bison. This helped me understand the dynamicism of how heavyweight animals move. And improving the composition, I was mostly flipping between options, but it still looks so wrong. Especially the younger bull. To be fair, I don't think I've done an illustration in this perspective before, and it was a bit of a trial and error and mostly ended in static poses. So I did run to a friend who advised me on how to get it fixed. Thank you, Pixel, I owe you one. And there was one important bit that I learned that he taught me. That these are wild animals. There had to be details on how to make the dinosaur come alive, and the smallest of adjustments make the biggest difference. But before this refined composition even started, I explored potential patterns. Since the Pachyrhinosaurus was found in North America, I pulled from North American birds for color ideas. And now, it's time to render.
A sphere, pure creative potential. What shall we make from it? A friend-shaped dinosaur full of compassion? A violent creature that is devoid of mercy? Or maybe a wanderer trying to live another day? The process begins tame. From a virtual mold, easy to control, I add up more details, making this creature feel more and more believable. I step into the unknown, explore new possibilities that were once impossible, face all the issues, and test new solutions. Sometimes I get stuck in a point what feels like no return, but at the end I get to reconstruct the marvelous and beautiful Pachyrhinosaurus in Blender. This time I actually remembered to properly scale the model. Always forget to do that. But anyways, as always, starting from the sphere, I use grab brush and almost only grab brush for the body. The rest is done with curves. So then, when I'm happy with the blockout, I turn it to geometry and use grab brush mostly to refine the shape. And the skull of a Retopology is very interesting. It's still a dinosaur. Its cheekbones are actually very much extruded to this side, and the back side of the skull is like almost comically large and wide. It's very funny. Yeah, I know. Now the lower jaw, pretty similar, keeping it similar to all dinosaurs because they're one group at the end of the day. Now, surprise, surprise, a new addition to my workflow is that I block out the pectoralis or the chest muscle. Since it is a pretty complex shape, I decided I will use a sphere for it, and it was actually a good choice. Then the jaw muscle, which is slightly different than in theropods. I added in, but it doesn't matter too much actually. You will see later. Same as with theropods, the lower leg is pretty wide. The front feet, the lower part, I turned them into hoof-like shape, and the fingers are actually pretty interesting. Because the Ceratopsians used to have 5 fingers, just like us humans, but they have a slight tilt to the outside when you look at it. Now it's time for the muscles. I like to start from the lats, since they are, I think, the most prominent muscle really, and the largest. I like to dig there underneath, if you've seen that. Then the deltoids, actually that small little itty bitty bit is not deltoid, which is interesting, but it's for the anatomy nerds. Then the arm anatomy, it's very similar to theropods as well. I know I'm repeating myself, but you know, it is a quadruped, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of similarities, as you see right here, and cannot forget about the cloaca, although I will resist to detail it anymore than this. Now I jump into higher density of the mesh and start adding more details. For the horns, I actually start from a cube that is subdivided. I think this is the best way. If I were to use snake hook, I think I have less control. Now I'm approaching a bit more complex territory. So there are actually levels to the anatomy. I know. I am refining all of the shapes and adding these striations, which are slightly visible if the skin is very tight. I know, I think no one will notice, but it's a great detail to add nonetheless. So I prefer to do it at the end. Now this growth and the nasal growth, I actually was adding a lot of different layers, smoothing and changing stuff up. Here in the render preview mode, I select the mist as a render pass to check the silhouette. Now actually a great thing that I did was smoothing that membrane that's around the mouth. And yeah, as I told you, the keratin growth goes through a lot of changes. Here I am refining the feet, and here I finally get to the wrinkles, which actually I like to create the biggest wrinkles, and on the neck I like to dig in a little bit, actually quite a lot. It gives a great result, and something new I've discovered. Also, Yeah, this wrinkle around the shoulder area, I like to make it really heavy. Gives a lot of personality and believability, I would say. Yeah, the new thing is that I also started to incorporate more of draw sharp brush. Yeah, look at this. This is such an upgrade from using purely standard brush, or the draw brush, sorry. So yeah, I cannot leave the tail area untouched in terms of wrinkles. I try to fill every single place with wrinkles. If they ought to be a bit more subtle, then I go with draw brush with low strength, or I just simply smooth that area out later on. Yeah, I like to also switch matcaps pretty often to have a different perspective on how the progress is going. Yeah, pretty uncommon area, but this is a good place to add the wrinkles under the frill. I close the mouth to see if everything is coming together nicely. Yes, this area around the leg, this is such a game changer to add wrinkles there, these slight ones with draw brush. It's time for the most exciting part, which is me talking about topology. So I changed up a technique. I started to retopologize from front to the back, but still the method stays the same in one way. I try to establish the main loops first, so you want to going around the beak or mouth, whatever you want to call it. It's a pretty long one, but it works. Then I loop around eyes, around this cheekbone, horn, around horns, and this is pretty cool. I create this kite shape that goes around the horns on the frill, these small, I don't know, osteoderms. I tried to change it up, one extra edge in between so that it connects with the other quad edges better. So yeah, then I add this quad edge that goes around this part, and I try to follow the curvature of the body in the best way possible. This is a form that is present, so I try to put a loop on it in a way. Another loop here, and then I finally get to connecting all of the parts. I try to create as many quads as possible. Sometimes it's very difficult, so in some areas it's fine. The nasal growth, it's a bit tricky to retopologize, but I basically add one loop around the cavity and one around the extruded part, if that makes sense. And I connect it everywhere. I add few loops, edge loops, and relax. Then I think this is the most annoying part. It's connecting the faces inside of the mouth. I try to add extra edges, and it's a good thing to have the exact amount of loops on the upper and lower part of the mouth. Yeah, the topology doesn't need to be super clean here, so at least that's a good thing. Then the loops around the horns and on the frill, I try to reduce them using the method 3-1 mostly. And I get to the edges around the neck and around the shoulders. I connect them together. Yeah, it can be this part can be pretty boring at times. You probably heard about it. And yeah, sometimes just triangles are very hard to avoid. So in some places they are fine. If the range of movement is reduced, you can have them. The contour tool is really great for the limbs. A new method for adding loops on the fingers. I'm gonna go like around from side of the fingers. It's really friendly for UV unwrapping, so I decided I would stick with it. And I add extra edge loops to have a better deformation of fingers, and they just connect better to the whole limb. Now it's time for the torso. I established the main loop and connect it to the previously created geometry. It's a bit awkward connection, but I guess it works. Yeah, Relax tool is one of my best friends when it comes to retopology. Then I do the underside of the front feet, one face in the middle and one to the side of the foot. Then I create this weird loop that kinda goes around that wrinkle and around the leg, because it needs to work this way, otherwise the deformation will be horrible. A really great thing that I added was the gap between the leg and the body needs to be present, and it really helps out with the posing and animation. Now I do the same as from the front limb using contours tool. It's really great. I connect the previously established loops. It's pretty actually nice for the leg. Then I create loops, but for the tail, mostly contour. It's really great, saves so much time. I connect the tip of the tail outside of Retopology because it's very difficult to do that there. And yeah, that just works. And I decided to go with a little bit different technique for the back feet. I also create loops that connect from the leg to the foot, but there's 2 faces per 1 finger. I add edge loops here to create an arch-like structure from the polygons, so that the deformations are relatively nice later on. Then just connecting stuff, but I spared literally no expense on the geometry right here, and I think it paid off later on, although this model is not gonna be animated, but still, it's a nice way to practice different techniques and how to deal with different amount of polygons. The backside or the underfoot, I connect all the polygons in a lazy way. I don't know if that was worth it, but I didn't notice too much of a difference later on when posing this model. Then I fill all of the gaps that are present, like on the claws and somewhere here inside of the mouth. I wasn't able to fill it with Retopology. Now it is time for the UV unwrapping. As I told you before in the videos that you have watched from me, the UV unwrapping is basically running themes around the main loops created in Retopology. So I make them for the shoulders, neck, head, legs. I had to create a cut with the knife tool. On the tail and then on the limbs I bring down the seam, and this is where it's the method of the arch is paying off. I don't know why I call it arch, I don't know why, but I get a clean seams. Also cut somewhere around where the claw would start. Yeah, the same goes for the front feet. Now I get to check if there's any stretching. I create new image with the UV grid as the generated type. Around 4K because I want to have one 4K map. I plug it in and just check if there's any stretching and these texels, I think that's what it's called. Seems like we're good. Then I connect any non-manifold geometry. I had to flip some normals. Actually, it was the first time I ran into this issue. So select all and shift N. Yeah, the tail. The tail was a bit problematic. I had to delete some faces. I had to remodel the tip, but that's about it. Now let's start rigging, which is the process that allows me to pose or animate the model. It's important that you do not move the main bone in the x-axis. From there, I begin from the hip and extrude towards the head. It's very important to properly name the bones because no one wants to deal with that mess, really. Remember to unparent the jaw and parent it to the head. For the tail, I subdivide one bone, and for one single bone, I assign it to 5 vertebrae, not vertices. Now, for the limbs, I create a shoulder bone, at least for the frontal limb. I extrude it, create the upper arm bone and the lower arm bone. It's important to parent the arm to the spine. Pretty similar stuff goes for the leg. It's important to move the joint of the knee to the very edge of the leg. It works the best this way because these are not real bones, these are digital bones, they're just supposed to be working. Then we get to the weight paint, which is quite challenging. Remember to change the blend type from mix to add and turn on auto normalize. So the jaw needs to have a rather smooth transition. but some part of it needs to be red, so 100% of influence. But the whole model is gonna be pretty much smooth in most areas. You will see what I mean by some. Some I mean the ones that aren't supposed to be moving. Some that you want to be stiff, such as this lower part of the body. It's not moving around, so it should be, therefore it should be red. Now I'm getting somewhere, it's just a matter of messing around with different poses, checking out what's working and what's not. Then I have decided that I would like to have more control over the arms and the legs, so I create fingers, name them properly. For the feet I want to curl them a bit more than fingers, so I subdivide them once, and of course give them .L so I can symmetrize them to the other side. And so I just weight paint it as usually, expecting nothing to go wrong. And it seems all good until I switch to I apply a pose, and everything seems to crumble. I check the influence of other bones and nothing seems to be working. So I have painted the whole foot bone red, and then from there I have started to paint the fingers, and actually it works pretty well. So if you're having trouble with influence, try to paint the bone that's highest in the hierarchy and then mess around with it. And now this way we got a pretty nice rig. After all that work being put in, we finally get to the detailing part. After applying the shrink wrap modifier to the multi-resolution, I had to basically refine what was created before and adding some worn out marks on the keratin stuff, such as horns and that growth. Then I grab an wrinkle alpha brush and put it all over the body of this ceratopsian, basically following the flow of the forms and previously drawn sculpted scales. It's pretty straightforward and not too difficult. Then I get to the most mind-numbing part, which is putting down the scales by hand this time. Since the Blender's optimization is better for sculpting, I can actually achieve a lot of detail with multi-resolution. I try my best to follow the previously established forms and the wrinkles that I have put, and they follow the forms, so it's like pretty much doing the same thing. With some variety, I change up the scale of scales, either X or Y, to give them more width or more length. And this putting scales process is very similar to Retopology, so I need to fill in gaps, but not with geometry, with very itty-bitty scales. At least what I mean following the wrinkles. For the eye area, I put down these more circular scales or elliptical scales. And after being done with these scales on the head, I add some signs of worn out areas. Begin to put down scales. Once again, same recipe following the wrinkles and filling in the gaps. Then I get to the stomach, a little bit bigger scales, and then I finally get fed up with putting everything by hand, so I create this custom VDM. And the way I use it, mask out the area that I do not want to be influenced by that VDM, and I put it down. It's pretty good, but the only downside of this is when I put it down and clear the mask, I need to fix the transition because it is pretty horrible. I use Crease Sharp, and I think it is the best use of this brush. I don't use it for anything else really in my sculpting. When I finish the arm, I add some manual scales on the toes, on the fingers. For the underbelly, I add these alligator style scales. They're pretty interesting, to be honest. I think it's based on the impressions of skin on ceratopsians. We get quite a few of these. Then the closer to tail I get, the more of these alligator scales I put on this animal. In the middle I put the scales with symmetry turned off. Same goes for the leg as for the arms, but this time with small twist. I basically stretch the VDM a little bit to give it some flow. For some areas that I want them to look bigger, I basically make the scales bigger, and it is a nice illusion, to be honest. For the lower feet, I once again pretty similar to the arm. I mask out the frill in order to put down the scales from the other side of it. And then we're getting very close to the end. Mask out the middle area. And with symmetry turned off, I put down the scales. And finally, I put down the skin pores to give the whole body some variation. And it's time to appreciate the work, because it's been very time consuming. For baking, I have installed an Uku Paint add-on, which allows me to use Blender similar to Substance Painter. So to bake normals, select the high poly, low poly, then other objects normal, and use these settings that I show you here. Gives a good result. Then to create the curvature inside of Krita, which is a free software similar to Photoshop, bring in normal map, go to edit, go to separate image, and press OK. Then delete the alpha, delete the normal, and then in the filter, select edge detection, change formula from pre-width to simple, output to bottom edge, and press OK. For the red channel, same stuff, but instead of bottom edge, select right edge. Now in the properties, for the green channel, change the blending mode to overlay, and for the blue channel, change it to multiply. And you're all set. Just save it as PNG and you're good. Then one quick thing that I have created is a new Shapekey called Elder, so a variation to this sculpt, an older and more powerful bull of Pachyrhinosaurus. It's a simple slider that allows variety. Now for the painting, I utilize both normal and curvature map. So the curvature map is a mask that I use on a black solid color, and in between the scales is the black color. It really is great for making the details pop. Here I create the first base white-ish layer, and I base my work on this wonderful concept art by Mosk. Here I am laying the first brown foundation. I use a brush with a noise texture applied to it, and a randomization. As you can see, you can apply it right here. You can mess around with hue, saturation, and value basically. Then I actually copy the concept art into image tab, and I can use the droplet icon to add all the colors to my palette, which actually I wasn't aware of this. It was present in Blender. So here I am laying another bit darker foundation. For the body, I can actually switch to this albedo purely render pass. It's called diffuse color, but it is basically good if you wanna take a look purely at the colors. Then I lay the another layer, but this one is a bit more pale-ish blue color. In the meantime, I have given less saturation to the base layer. I improved the blue layer and add the white highlights, which are the highlight of this pattern. I'm using also noise brush, drawing out the block out, let's say, of this pattern. And here I am starting to refine the transition, so the workflow looks like erasing and adding stuff. Then time for the red highlight, which I think this was the most fun part to do. It's purely on the crest, which is going to gain a lot of, get a lot of attention. Now time to paint the mouth. I don't know why I forgot about it. Then I paint the roughness, the shiny parts, so the keratin stuff and so on. Then the highlight on the eye, because I think it wasn't given enough attention in this pattern. And yes, just further refining. Then I forgot to make up the tongue, so I did that really quickly. Make up the normals and paint it pink. This way we are done with textures. Yay! We're slowly closing in on the whole process, and right now what you can see on the screen is me trying to give some variety to the two males fighting. I base my work entirely on Mosk's piece. You've probably seen it before in the earlier part of the video, but I'm going to show you it here once again. The bigger bull has the morph of the elder, and the smaller bull has no morph at all. Here I am adding some landscape to make the whole scene look more interesting, and using botanic add-on I scatter grass on this plane. It lags my PC so much. Then, to give some variety, I've decided to pull out the plane, the mesh out of the plane, to add these little valleys. And it really isn't the answer, but I'm getting close, the right thing to do. I mess around more with grass, also with HDRIs. The light should be relatively sharp, not too smooth, to make the scales pop. Then I change up the background mountains and mess around more with the terrain. Here I mess around even more, but with post-processing, all the colors, saturation, and color boost, all the things. If I don't win, something bad might happen.
Please be me, please.
And the winner is...
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who wins. Because some might say it's the 3D piece because they enjoy the more realistic art. Some might say it's the work made by Mosk because they enjoy more stylized stuff and 2D stuff, drawings. You shouldn't put your win based on opinions of others, because let's say you have been stuck in a route for 2 weeks, let's say, and you haven't been able to produce anything creative for that time. And say you joined a competition and you were very consistent for 3 days, but you got very low in leaderboards, let's say. It's still a win, but from the outside it might be seen as you've lost, you are a horrible artist. It doesn't mean that. You shouldn't put the outside tell you what the win is. You should trust yourself a bit more than say winner-loser by the standard rules. And so having to compete with someone is the great initial motivation to do just a little bit more. Say you're very tired, but you see the other person is working hard at the same time. You still you feel like you're missing out on something, and you know the root of this feeling is not necessarily positive, but you can turn the negative into a positive that is beneficial for growth. I would like to thank Mosk for working with me on this awesome project. I feel like you did a lot of heavy lifting here for this video, from ideas to the scripting. At this current time I haven't seen your side of the video, but I'm very excited to see that. I would like to thank Regalius for hosting this event. Without me joining his server, I wouldn't even have this opportunity to collab. And you, dear viewer, for watching this video. And I would like to encourage, check out the Mosk's TikTok channel. She makes really great content. I am really a big fan of her videos. Also her shop on Etsy, really great stickers and chains. And yes, I think I will see you next one. Subscribe, see ya.